a shocking investigation done by the Gateway Pundit and Judicial Watch discovers the Biden administration let Gonzalo Lira, an American citizen, a YouTuber, and a political dissenter, die in a Ukrainian prison. Through a Freedom of Information Act request, State Department emails about Gonzalo Lira reveal the U.S. Embassy was aware of threats to Gonzalo Lira's life, but considered it, quote, no rush. Let's go over some of the emails. This was a two-part report that was put out by the Gateway Pundit. Let me just read to you one of the emails that was sent. This was sent from U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink. Who it was sent to was someone in Kiev, someone also at the State Department. It is redacted. We don't know who exactly this was sent to. The subject from her was Gonzalo Lira case. This was written on Thursday, August 3rd of 2023. Let me just give you a little bit of background about Gonzalo Lira. YouTuber Gonzalo Lira was arrested in Kharkiv, Ukraine on May 1st, 2023 by a heavily armed SWAT team of the Ukrainian SBU secret police for the crime of justifying Russian aggression, which translates as criticizing the war and the government. Okay, this was a speech case. He was arrested and died in jail for speech. On July 6th, he was then released on bail and attempted to leave the country for Hungary on his motorbike, posting a video along the way, which we'll show you a little bit later. He was quite aware of the danger to his life. On August 1st, however, he was rearrested and imprisoned in a solitary confinement in Kharkiv. And then later he died January 11th or 12th at the age of 55, so nearly 1 year ago. Now, why was he in Ukraine? Gonzalo Lira married a Ukrainian woman. He moved to Ukraine in 2020, with whom he has 2 children. They later separated. When Russia invaded Ukraine in February of 2021, he frequently criticized the mainstream media, the Ukrainian and U.S. governments, and specifically Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, Victoria Nuland. Now, the Gateway Pundit tried to get emails between Victoria Nuland and U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink. They filed an FOIA request on January 15th, 4 days after his death, but the State Department is stalling on this, and they recently told the Gateway Pundit that their request would not be completed until March 31st of 2026. The Gateway Pundit has now applied for extradited processing. Meanwhile, Judicial Watch has filed a more general Freedom of Information Act request pertaining to the case of Gonzalo Lira, which does not focus specifically on the communication between Nuland and Ambassador Brink. It's more of a general, give us some general emails. The Department of State released 769 heavily redacted pages to Judicial Watch in May, October, and last month. The Gateway Pundit then received these documents from Judicial Watch and is now reporting exclusively on the State Department's egregious failure to save Gonzalo Lira's life and subsequent attempts at the spin that they attempted. So let's go over some of the emails, the communication that Judicial Watch was able to get. So this was sent from U.S. Ambassador Bridget Brink regarding the Gonzalo Lira case. It says, thanks to you and the team for following up so diligently on this case. Is there any outstanding request from him or SOP that suggests we should or do or could or should do anything more? Many thanks. Now, this was sent from somebody in Kiev and the State Department, somebody in the State Department, I believe, in Kiev, to Bridget Brink, the ambassador to Ukraine. And they said, greetings, ambassador. And this was sent Thursday, August 3rd. This was after he was rearrested when he tried to escape. He tried to go to Hungary, tried to apply for asylum, and was rearrested. He says, greetings, ambassador. Please see below for a full rundown of the Gonzalo Lira situation. Mr. Lira was released on bail July 6th after approximately 2 months incarceration, during which cons met with him virtually 3 times. He recently released a video alleging torture and bribery on part of the Ukrainians and stated his desire to cross the border into Hungary to request political asylum. We were unable to virtually attend his hearing yesterday, but he appears to have not appeared. RT alleges that he was arrested on the border, but the Ukrainians have not notified us. We have a pending request for notification, and they give a timeline saying May 1st, Lira was arrested. May 2nd, consular notification was sent. May 11th, notification was received. May 17th was the first virtual consular visit. So they did have a consular visit with Gonzalo Lira about 17 days after he was arrested. Then about a little over a month later, on June 23rd, they had another consular visit with him virtually. Then on the 26th, he had his first court hearing. On July 3rd, they had a third virtual consular visit with Gonzalo Lira. And on the 4th, Mr. Lira paid bail via his attorney. And on the 6th, he was released. On the 1st of August, he posted a new YouTube video and Twitter thread saying he was on the run. And August 2nd, and then he got arrested. August 2nd hearing, Cons was unable to attend. RT alleges that Lira was arrested on the border. Then they give full details of this. So that was kind of their timeline, like the summary of what had happened. And then they gave a more detailed description of what happened. And I want to read some of this to you because it kind of gives you the insight of what the State Department was thinking and how they viewed Gonzalo Lira. So they said, on May 11th, we received written notification via mail from the SBU of the arrest of Gonzalo Lira in Kharkiv on May 1st. The letter was dated May 2nd. He was formally charged with a violation of Article 436-2, Part 2 of the Criminal Code, quote, justification, recognition as legitimate denial of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, glorification of its participants. So, speech crime. Mr. Lira operates a YouTube site where he posts numerous videos that criticize the Ukrainian and U.S. governments, to whom he attributes blame for the war in Ukraine. We subsequently received numerous emails from Mr. Lira's supporters calling for us to secure his release. We also received similar emails from Mr. Lira's father, Gonzalo Sr. So it's nice to know from this that your messages, your emails to the State Department were heard. They got those emails. They mention them right here. So good for you if you sent those. They somewhat work. They are being read. They are being heard. It says they didn't do anything about it, but they acknowledged that they got them. We immediately contacted the local authorities in Kharkiv, and after some negotiation, arranged to speak with him via teleconference on May 17th. Mr. Lira did not report any specific physical mistreatment. However, he stated he had been deprived of his property and not given regular access to an attorney. A rotating cast of public defense attorneys had visited him, none of which seemed invested in his case. He otherwise appeared to be in good health and in good spirits. He also mentioned that he was hesitant to discuss everything because our conversation was monitored. I informed him that we would send our attorney list and encourage the prison officials in court to ensure he'd be able to retain an attorney of his choosing. Mr. Lira cautioned us not to speak with his father, from whom he has been estranged for years, but filled out a Privacy Act waiver for his sister. I spoke one-on-one with the prison warden directly following my conversation with Mr. Lira. We discussed the serious nature of the case, including the potential media attention. I suggested that this was an excellent opportunity to present Ukraine's values, specifically that he should not be mistreated in any way, and provided immediate access to an attorney. The warden agreed with me. I also called Mr. Lira's sister to discuss his case. She informed me that although she strongly disagrees with his politics and does not regularly communicate with him, she shares concern about his well-being and appreciated the contact. So this is kind of interesting that, for one, we've had Mr. Gonzalo Lira's, the senior, we've had his father on the show a couple of times. He did mention during those times that he was on the show that they were estranged and he had not spoken to him for a while. Apparently, Gonzalo himself didn't want the State Department communicating with his father and only gave authorization to speak to the sister. Nonetheless, his father has been the biggest advocate for him and even alerted me by emailing me about this particular investigation. So his dad is still very much involved. His dad still very much cares. He says here that also what I found interesting about this is that he said that, he spoke to the prison warden and said, this would be a good time to present Ukraine's values. Yeah, that did not go over well, right? I mean, Gonzalo Lira is dead. So what Ukrainian values? He was, there's strong evidence he was tortured while he was in jail. So that's the type of value. Not to mention the reason why he was even incarcerated to begin with, for speech. So what sort of Ukrainian values are these? He goes on to say that on June 22nd, Consul General held a virtual prison visit with Mr. Lira. He appeared to be in good physical health, stated that he was being treated well by the Ukrainian prison guards, and that they had been very respectful of him. He also stated that he was in a detention area with 7 other detainees, and they had good relationships with them. Now, remember, when Gonzalo is saying all of this, he has acknowledged that his communication is being monitored. So he's in jail. He's with his captors. I mean, imagine. So you're with your captors. You know your captors are listening. What are you going to say? Are you going to say, they're torturing me? You're probably not going to say that. So they should have probably not just been like, no, he's fine. He's cool. He's okay. They probably should have done a little bit of more investigating on that. Said during the June 26 court hearing, Lira's detention was extended for 60 days with the possibility to post bail. On July 3rd, the Consular General held another virtual prison visit with Mr. Lira. During the call, Lira requested that Cons contact his wife to request she transmit to his lawyer money for his bail, explained that this was the first time Lira has spoken to his wife. According to Lira, she lives in Lviv and that he did not list her on his PAW. He wrote a statement that gave Cons permission to contact her and held it up to the camera, took a screenshot of the statement and scanned it into his ACS case. Also explained that we have limitations as to what we can say and that we could provide the contact info of Lira's attorney to his wife, but that was the extent of what we could do. He goes on to say that on July 4th, an ACS assistant spoke with Mr. Lira's attorney. He indicated that the process of paying for bail was proceeding in installments due to financial restrictions. He was subsequently released on July 6th. On August 1st, Mr. Lira released 3 YouTube videos and a long post on Twitter. He alleged that local inmates were allowed or commanded to torture him while in prison. So now he's out and he's telling the truth. He's no longer being held by his captors. And he's saying, they tortured me in there. He had to pay significant bribes for release and that the U.S. Embassy provided no help except for empty bromides. However, he did confirm that his release on bail happened surprisingly fast. He confirmed that his passports had been returned to him, as well as his property and motorcycle. He said that he felt he was being implicitly allowed to leave Ukraine. He communicated his plans to cross the border into Hungary and request political asylum. Mr. Lira's next hearing was scheduled for today, August 2nd. Mr. Lira allegedly did not appear for the hearing, which proceeded without him. We were unable to attend due to the court's last-minute failure to provide us virtual access. We are awaiting a full summary of the hearing. Throughout this process, we continue to maintain contact with Mr. Lira's sister. We regularly still receive numerous email requests from his supporters to intervene on his behalf. So that's great. Still getting those numerous emails. So again, that somewhat worked. Said RT posted an article yesterday confirming that Mr. Lira had been detained. The only source cited is known Russian supporter and frequent RT guest. Cons has reached out to our contacts with the border guards and law enforcement to additional information. We will, of course, provide updates as this develops. So what's also interesting about that is they say, there's like this RT person and they're the only source, but they're saying that he's been rearrested. And that person was right. So, when they say, oh, this Russian misinformation, blah, that person did seem to have more information than the American embassy did. So then the emails that they cite here in the Gateway Pundit, they said that after Lira's attempt to leave the country for Hungary and was rearrested on July 31st, the U.S. Embassy American Citizen Services, which is ACS is what it's short for, they spoke to him on the phone on August 4th and tried to ask Mr. Lira about his mental and physical health. And Mr. Lira repeatedly interrupted this inquiry with extended monologues about threats to his life and safety, believing the Ukrainian government would actively conspire to have him killed by inmates in prison. So this was one of the emails. So they knew now by August that he was claiming they were trying to kill him. Says the emails make it clear the embassy did not attach a high priority to helping Lira and referred to his attempt to escape alive as, quote, his attempt to abscond to Hungary. So they treated him like a criminal. Again, what was his crime? It was speech, which is not a crime here in the United States. They still treated him as a criminal. And then when he ran for his life, they called it an attempt to abscond to Hungary. The emails also show how the State Department willfully parroted the false charges of being a Russian agent that ended up costing Gonzalo Lira his life. On August 3rd, American Citizen Services, ACS, wrote to ACS offices in Hungary. So ACS in Ukraine wrote to ACS offices in Hungary, Moldova, Slovakia, and Romania, which was the direction that Gonzalo Lira was heading towards when he was trying to flee Ukraine. And they gave them a heads up saying that Gonzalo Lira was trying to get out of the country. So not only did they not help him get out, but they actually warned these other countries of, hey, we've got this criminal, this speech criminal on the loose, and he's trying to abscond to one of these states. So we're just giving you a heads up that he's on his way. Gonzalo, they also said that in the emails, they said that Gonzalo Lira is a U.S. citizen and outspoken pro-Putin blogger, previously arrested in Ukraine on charges related to wartime propaganda. So they had no qualms about claiming that. American citizen services, saying, yes, he's being charged with wartime propaganda. Mr. Lira is very popular among certain niche populations, they wrote, and our public inbox is full of his followers. We do not engage or respond, they said. After his arraignment, the Ukrainian government released him on bail without an ankle monitor and gave him back both his motorcycle and passport. He's been a bit of a headache to the Ukrainian government, so we suspect they're hoping he'll quietly disappear from the country. They arrested him, so they clearly didn't want him to do that. Then he had a hearing. After he was rearrested, he had a hearing. After the hearing on August 23rd, the embassy noted that Lira's lawyer, quote, did not notice any visible signs of physical abuse from his latest detention. He requested that the U.S. embassy re-engage with local authorities regarding Mr. Lira's case. Then on December 6th, so now we fast forward, and on December 6th, an email from the U.S. Embassy Kiev ahead of Lira's December 21st hearing reads, quote, on December 6th, Kiev ACS had an hour-long virtual visit with U.S. Chilean dual citizen Gonzalo Lira. The embassy wrote, noting that Mr. Lira was agitated and uncooperative throughout the conversation, often berating and threatening ACS. He spoke about his chronic heart issues and requested that the embassy assist in getting him access to his personal email. Mr. Lira explained that representatives of Tucker Carlson had attempted to contact him and his family for interviews. He demanded that the embassy assist with scheduling. ACS offered to relay a request for more frequent contact to his attorney, but we do not intend further action for his request to organize media interviews. Allegations against the U.S. government, Mr. Lira accused the U.S. government of, 1, conspiring with the Ukrainian government to allow him to die in prison. Well, 2, hindering progress in his criminal case. 3, obstructing his access to the Chilean embassy. And 4, failing to advocate for his release due to discrimination. Kiev ACS rejects these allegations. Although the email showed they did nothing to try to, they said nothing to Kiev about, hey, we're Americans, free speech, come on now, let the guy go, give him back to us. They never said anything like that. They said instead, well, the Ukrainian government has problems with him and he's there for wartime propaganda and he tried to abscond to Hungary. Threats to U.S. government officials. They say Mr. Lira claimed that he had provided the names of Kiev ACS officers to third parties who have doxed these officials. Our cursory online searches. This is Gateway Pundit saying that they did online searches and that did not, or maybe actually this is from the email. They're saying that they did not corroborate this claim. Throughout the conversation, he made threats against numerous other U.S. government officials in the administration and the State Department, including unspecified harm, as well as litigation for unspecified claims. Prosecution, Mr. Lira accused the Ukrainian government of prosecutorial misconduct. He believes the court-appointed translator to be incompetent and unable to capture the nuances of his allegedly seditious statements. ACS assured Mr. Lira that we will raise these issues with his attorney. And then it goes on to say that as Lira responded with increasing anger and fear for his life, the U.S. Embassy appears to have done nothing to intervene on his behalf, instead responding haughtily and defensively. They wrote, this visit does not sound, the person responded to this email where they're saying, he had threats to U.S. government officials and there was, all these, and Tucker Carlson's trying to get a hold of him. And then the person responded saying, this was a U.S. Embassy person said, this visit does not sound pleasant. And I don't think anyone deserves to hear this garbage. Yes, garbage. An unnamed embassy official wrote in response on December 6th, question, what were the exact nature of the threats? Justification, we of course want to provide consular services, but this should not come at the cost of being threatened and having colleagues' personal information out there. No need to answer now, no rush, said the same official later on in the day. That was December 6th. Gonzalo Lira was dead a month later. There is, however, a smoking gun to this case of the Biden administration completely failing to help him. On January 8th, legislative assistant Justin Stebbins in Senator Ron Johnson's office wrote to the State Department and said, We have received numerous inquiries about Gonzalo Lira's case, a YouTuber arrested in Ukraine. Can you provide an update on his case? Apparently, his first hearing was on December 10th. As I'm sure you're aware, Lira has alleged he was tortured while detained in May and June and has been less than flattering about state support. I am aware of the limitations regarding what state can do for an arrested citizen abroad, and I've conveyed this, but it would be very helpful to have an account of the facts and status of the case according to the state. And in a follow-up email, Stebbins wrote, quote, I'm primarily concerned with the state's assessment of Lira's claims of being beaten and tortured while detained in May and June. Additionally, does state expect to weigh in on Ukrainian Criminal Code 436-2, a law cited by Freedom House as problematic in general? So it took all the way until January 8th for a assistant in Senator Ron Johnson's office to finally say, don't you find his arrest problematic? That it's kind of against, free speech. So why haven't you guys even brought that up? This was the first time in the emails that Judicial Watch received from the Freedom of Information request. This was the first email all the way January 8th before somebody finally said, the whole law is problematic. So why haven't you been fighting for this guy's release? Nobody in the State Department, nobody at the U.S. embassies, no one at the American Citizens, whatever services, nobody brought up the fact that the law itself was totally antithetical to American values. And there we were, giving billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine because why? They're the only democracy. They're a democracy. They're fighting for values. They're fighting for American values, Western values. They have the same values. It's bullshit. They don't. They absolutely do not. And they killed an American. They incarcerated an American for speech. They let that they tortured that American. They then killed that American, essentially. And yet here we are. Our tax dollars, your and my tax dollars, are going off to this country while they kill Americans, and while the U.S. State Department sits there and says, well, that guy sounds awful. So, we don't want, we're kind of here to help, I guess, but not if he's going to be awful to us. Why did you think he was going to send you roses? He's in jail, he's being tortured, and he's being charged with speech crimes, and you guys are sitting on your asses doing nothing, and you expect him to what? Send you a Christmas card? This is how they were behaving. No, of course the guy's going to be incensed. Of course he's going to be not pleasant towards you. You're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. And you're not even bringing up the fact that he's being held on charges that are totally bogus. So Gonzalo Lira, by that time, January 8th, by the time the legislative assistant, Justin Stebbins, writes to the State Department, Gonzalo Lira was essentially on his deathbed, already in the ICU. He was already suffering, and he's already in really grave condition. Says that Gonzalo Lira Sr., who'd been on the show a couple of times, kept writing to the U.S. Embassy every single day, begging for them to save his son's life, right up until January 11th, the day Gonzalo Lira died. Says, hi team, Mr. Lira's father is now emailing us every day with the same information. Let's talk today about how we want to respond to these. The American Citizen Services Unit of the U.S. Embassy in Kiev wrote that. Like he's writing us every single day. And he keeps saying, my son has been in the hospital in critical health condition. Have you visited him to ensure he's receiving proper medical treatment? Will you report to me, or will this be another unanswered letter? So his dad was getting no response from the State Department. It goes on to say, so after Gonzalo died, and this is really, before he dies, the smoking gun on this is that on January 4th, the U.S. Embassy in Kiev wrote that, quote, we will submit to Consular Affairs Overseas Citizen Services to approve post's request to request humanitarian release for U.S. citizen Gonzalo Lira. So January 4th, he was arrested originally May 1st. Then he was released in July, rearrested August 1st. And now finally, January 4th, they're saying, you know what we're going to do? We're going to go ahead and request humanitarian release for U.S. citizen Gonzalo Lira. Attached was a diplomatic note requesting humanitarian release for Gonzalo Angel Lira. It was marked approved by Deputy Assistant Secretary for Overseas Citizen Services, Angela Kerwin, in the Bureau of Consular Affairs of the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C. This means they could have done this. I mean, their hands were not tied. They could have requested release of an American citizen months earlier. But they waited for him to get extremely sick. He started getting extremely sick in November. He started getting worse and worse and worse, and worse and worse. And by January, he was in the ICU, unable to really speak. And that's when they said, well, now we want to do a humanitarian release. The consular section at Embassy Kiev was notified this morning that U.S. citizen Gonzalo Lira passed away late in the evening of January 11th in a Kharkiv hospital. He was admitted to the hospital ICU on January 4th and was receiving treatment for chronic heart disease and pneumonia. An autopsy is being performed, after which we hope to learn the exact cause of death. The morning after Lira's death, the State Department was already in spin control mode. In an email dated 8:45 on January 12th, an unnamed official at State wrote, quote, seeking clearance on press guidance on the death of U.S. citizen Gonzalo Lira in Ukraine by 10 a.m. The press guidance attached to the email entitled, quote, Ukraine, death of U.S. citizen Gonzalo Lira, 12 January 24, and it was not included in the Freedom of Information Act release, so they don't know what that guidance ended up being. But there was an email that was sent from this is the email that they wrote saying, what do we do? And they basically give a timeline, and they say that Friday, November 24th, ACS received an after-hours call from Mr. Lira's attorney that Mr. Lira was having respiratory problems. November 27th, ACS submits a written request to the Kharkiv pretrial detention center requesting a virtual visit. December 6th, ACS speaks with Mr. Lira and his attorney. Mr. Lira raised issues regarding health, including respiratory illness and infection. ACS agrees to raise his health issues with the detention center. December 7th, ACS requests permission to attend Mr. Lira's December 12th hearing by video conference. December 11th, ACS speaks with Mr. Lira's counsel, who indicated that he visits Mr. Lira every 10 to 14 days to provide food and over-the-counter medications. Counsel further indicated that he was in communication with Mr. Lira's father and sister. Mr. Lira was to undergo a further health examination the same day. December 12th, ACS tries to CISO an update on Mr. Lira's health. The warden of CISO was unavailable due to ongoing Kyivstar outage issues. ACS talks with Mr. Lira before his criminal hearing. He was alert and communicative. He raised concerns of distended abdomen, swollen legs, trouble sleeping. He acknowledged that he received treatment for his illness and saw medical professionals. Mr. Lira confirmed that he has regular access and communication with his attorney, through whom he was successfully communicated with family, press, and other contacts. ACS agreed to continue raising his health issues with CISO. December 15th, ACS requests permission to attend Mr. Lira's court hearing virtually on December 22nd. December 18th, Mr. Lira is transferred from his cell to a center's medical unit. So he's finally going to a medical unit, December 18th. So it's like 3 weeks after he first started having problems. ACS was not informed of the transfer at the time. December 19th, ACS sends a request to CISO Medical Unit for more information on Mr. Lira's health. December 20th, the embassy sends diplomatic note requesting clarification on the procedures of how to receive timely information regarding U.S. citizens detained or incarcerated in Ukraine. December 22nd, ACS attends Mr. Lira's court hearing virtually. He does not attend the hearing in person, but rather virtually from the health unit. Mr. Lira was alert, participated actively in the proceedings. Mr. Lira, through his attorney, complained of swelling in his lower extremities, abdomen, and groin, as well as a heart arrhythmia. The CISO doctor indicated to the court that Mr. Lira was suffering from double pneumonia and was receiving adequate medical care, specialist supervision, and treatment. The doctor further stated that Mr. Lira did not require hospitalization. I don't understand that the CISO Medical Center could provide necessary and sufficient treatment, and that Mr. Lira would be well enough to attend the next hearing in person. So they essentially took him from his cell to the medical unit at the prison, and they didn't put him in a hospital still at this point. December 26, CISO acknowledges that they have outstanding requests for information on Mr. Lira's health. CISO notes ongoing issues with the Kyivstar outage and staff shortages. So they're like, we can't communicate with you. Sorry, our system's down. December 29th, ACS receives a response from CISO clarifying rights and procedures on how a detainee may request and receive outside medical care. CISO cites Ukrainian privacy laws that it cannot release health information without Mr. Lira's consent. January 3rd, ACS requests permission from Kharkiv court to attend his upcoming January 8th criminal hearing by video conference. ACS requests clarification from the CISO medical unit on how Mr. Lira can provide consent for the embassy to receive further updates on his private health information. January 4th, ACS learns that Mr. Lira has been taken to the Kharkiv Emergency Hospital. ACS calls the hospital, which refuses to provide information or even confirmation that Mr. Lira has been admitted. ACS sends written requests to hospital for information on Mr. Lira's health. ACS drafts a consent to release private information, which Mr. Lira signs with his counsel. So finally, he gets to a hospital, and that's the day that the State Department says, humanitarian release. Friday, January 5th, ACS starts daily calls with the medical director of Mr. Lira's hospital. He is in serious condition and was admitted to the intensive care unit. The presiding doctor indicated that Mr. Lira may have previously had a heart attack. So he had a damn heart attack, and they didn't ever take him to the hospital. She could not offer a diagnosis or prognosis on his condition or future treatment plan. In further written response, the hospital informed ACS that the doctors were still running tests and did not have sufficient information for a diagnosis and continuing treatment because he got there too late. The Ukrainian prison just didn't take him to the hospital fast enough. He should have been in hospital the minute they thought he had pneumonia back in November. And yet they didn't. And he had a heart attack, and they still didn't get him proper medical treatment. They just had him in like the nurses unit at the prison or something. It's like when you go to the school nursing office. I mean, that's essentially what they did. January 8th, ACS speaks with Mr. Lira's doctor. His condition was still serious. Doctors were still running tests, did not have conclusive information for diagnosis and continuing treatment. Again, because he got there too damn late. January 9th, ACS learns that Mr. Lira's condition continues to be serious. The hospital medical director does not object to a virtual visit with Mr. Lira, but she defers to CISO on granting permission to conduct the visit. January 10th, ACS receives a log of medical treatment from August 7th through January 4th from the Healthcare Center of the State Criminal Enforcement Service of Ukraine. It offers factual recitation, but no prognosis. ACS sends a letter to the Kharkiv court requesting a video conference with Mr. Lira at the earliest opportunity. The court was initially reluctant because the presiding judge was on leave through January 18th. Upon ACS's insistence, the court was persuaded that Mr. Lira's health presented an urgent matter and authorized the visit with concurrent notification to the MFA, CISO, and the hospital. ACS receives a separate update from the hospital that his situation remains serious. January 11th, the embassy sends diplomatic note 19 to the Ukraine Ministry of Foreign Affairs to draw their attention to Mr. Lira's condition. ACS receives an update from the hospital that his situation remains serious. ACS received notification from Kharkiv courts authorizing an ACS visit with Mr. Lira via video conference on either January 11th or 12th. At 3 o'clock p.m., ACS speaks with Mr. Lira via video conference for 45 minutes. He appears unwell but awake. He is short of breath and at times incoherent, and he suspects that he may be over-medicated. ACS asks him for any requests, and he indicates that, one, he wanted ACS to tell his attorney that his kidney stones are a result of prior magnesium and potassium supplements, and two, he would like doctors to answer his questions on at least what time and date it is when he asks. January 12th, ACS receives notification from Mr. Lira's physician that he passed away. And they notify his wife, his ex-wife, and his children. I mean, this was a massive failure by the State Department. They should have demanded, the minute they knew he was unwell in November, that he be sent to a hospital. The U.S. government should have demanded that. We are, in fact, paying for that damn war. Completely. Why did they not demand that a U.S. citizen get proper treatment in a damn hospital where the doctors would have had time to diagnose and treat him properly, not send him to the hospital when he's on his last leg and the doctors are scrambling trying to figure out what the hell happened. By that point, when you're on death's bed, everything begins failing. They can't even begin to identify where this began because it's now a domino effect, a snowball of problems that have happened inside of your system. And now it's one thing after the other, and so many things are shutting down and so many things are going wrong that how can the doctors even begin to even solve the problem at that point? They let him die in the prison, and the US government sat there and did nothing about it and didn't even say, guys, he shouldn't even be there for speech crimes. This is not an American value. This is an American citizen. He spoke up. That's not illegal here. We're funding your damn war. You want to keep getting those weapons? Send our citizens home. None of that happened. They waited until January 4th to request humanitarian release. That was by the time he already got to the hospital, and the hospital was like, this guy's in bad shape, and we have no idea why. We can't even begin to diagnose him. We're still trying to figure this out. This was a massive failure on the part of the Biden administration. Floods and floods of emails. They indicated they received your emails. You emailed, they received them, they acknowledged they received them, and they still did nothing about it. They did nothing about it. They let this guy rot. They even notified Hungary and Slovakia and said, oh, by the way, we got a guy on the run. He's trying to abscond to your country. He's running from breaking the law. What law? You know, and it took finally a legislative aide in Senator Ron Johnson's office to say, don't you find that law kind of problematic, guys? Like, what the hell is going on here? So massive, massive failure. This is how the US government treats journalists. Should be no surprise after what the US did to Julian Assange, after our greatest ally, Israel, after we see what they've done to people like Jeremy Lafredo and he got lucky. Jeremy was a lucky one. A lot of the others end up dead. And the US government turns a blind eye. So the US government, you know, the government that claims to be for free speech, protecting American values, will let journalists die. Will let journalists get arrested, detained for journalism, for the act of speech, and then we'll let them die. That's what the US government will do. And that's what this Freedom of Information Act request from Judicial Watch uncovered, that the State Department was completely negligent, and they had the opportunity well in advance to request release. And they never once requested release. They should have just said, we request release, give him back to us. We don't want this to be an issue. He's an American. Let's get him out of there. You guys don't like him. Fine. We'll get him out of there. And they could have done that back in May. They could have done that in June. They could have done that in July, or certainly in August after he was rearrested. That's when they absolutely could have done this. But instead, they handed over our money and they let an American journalist die in jail without medical attention. This is just absolutely disgusting what happened here. Totally and completely disgusting. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson show. If you want to watch the full show, visit KimIversonShow.com. The show airs every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Again, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.